Hello all. In this session, we will moving to the friction chapter. That is module 2, right? In the module 2, we have two chapters. One is equilibrium of forces and another is friction, right? So friction. So you have heard this word in the normal, day-to-day life while we are talking. So easily, if I want to tell if I want to tell what is friction means, for example, when you're walking under your shoes or on your slippers, under that you can see the roughness of the shoes or a slipper, right? There is a lines or any patterns are provided under the shoes or slippers. That is why I think you can see why it is means it's normally to avoid the friction or a slipping, right? Because we'll be walking in a smooth surface maybe sometimes, so that's why they're providing the different patterns under the the slipper or shoes to avoid the friction. So I think you all I got it a clue about what is friction. So friction, it is also called as a frictional force. It is defined as the tangential force developed to prevent the motion. It is one more force will develop, right, to prevent that the motion. Okay, we will see the definition now. So before going to definition, we will see what are the things we are going to see in this session, right? What is friction? What is limiting friction? Types of friction, angle of friction, coefficient of friction, angle of repose, and loss of friction. So before going to the problems, must and should we have to know all these contents. But in this session, we are studying only what is friction, limiting friction, types of friction. Another four I'm going to explain the next PPT, right? Okay, what is friction? When a body slides or tend to slide on a surface on which it is resting, a resisting force opposing the motion is produced at the contact surface. This resisting force is called as a frictional force. Okay, so you can see in the figure that blue color, that is an object which is resting on the green color platform. If the motion is going rightwards, for example, someone is pushing that object, or you imagine it as a brick, all right? If someone is pushing from that side, frictional force will be developing in the opposite side, right? So always frictional force will be developing to the opposite side, so that will so the frictional force is defined as a tangential force developed as to prevent the motion which is coming on the rough surface with respect to the another rough surface. So therefore, friction always opposes the motion of the body. In other words, we can tell the frictional force acts opposite to the direction of the motion of the body. So you can see clearly that pushing force is, you can see, rightwards, and the friction force is acting leftwards. Next one, limiting friction, almost the same. The maximum friction force that can be developed at the contact surfaces when body is just on the point of moving is called the limiting friction. You can see when, for example, here the small black color box, that is a object which is resting on the floor or a ground. You can see the movement acting rightwards, right? So the frictional force, that is limiting friction, acting leftwards, right? For this, the normal reaction will be opposite to the weight, right? See, the limiting friction, the weight of that block is acting downwards. Always we know the self weight of the body always vertically downwards. The own weight of the body is vertically downwards. To resist that weight, we have one more normal reaction upwards, that marked in a green color arrow, right? So the limiting friction, the mainly the limiting friction, the contact surface will be the main important thing here. Next, Here you can see types of the friction. In friction we can see number of places. Maybe the ground is dry, or it is filled with a fluid or any grease or any oil. The friction will be different to the situations, right? The friction will be different in dry areas, friction will be different in the the liquid area, the friction will be different in the oil. If the surface having oil, if any force is acting on that, the friction will be different, right? So this is the types of friction we have. First one, static friction, right? Friction experienced by a body when it is at rest, right? You can see if the body is under rest, no, the friction will be different in this. Static means the body will be under rest. So the friction which is developed in that situation, so okay, so that is called as a static friction. Okay, next one, dynamic friction. Friction experienced by a body when it is under motion. So if any body is under motion or moving to the one place to another place, so in that place the friction will be different. So that is called dynamic friction. Next one, and also dynamic friction is also called as kinetic friction. Okay. Next one, sliding friction. Friction experienced by a body when it slides over another body. Okay. For example, if two bodies are moving at a time. Okay, so in that case, the sliding friction will occur. Next, rolling friction. Friction experienced by a body when it rolls over another body. So when the body is rolling above the another body, so there another type of friction will develop, frictional force will develop. So that is called rolling friction, right? Okay, here you can see few types of frictions. First one, you can see static friction, right? The force acting leftwards, the force acting rightwards. The static friction, the frictional force acting leftwards. Okay, next one, sliding. So sliding motion, that is also the motion is acting rightwards. Sliding friction acts leftwards. Next one, the rolling. You can see the road rollers which is rolling, above the road surface. So there you can take this. The rolling motion acts in the clockwise direction, that is to the rightwards. The rolling friction will be acting to the leftwards. So these are the few the types of frictions you have. And another types of friction is fluid friction. The fluid friction, the friction acting on the body when the contact surface are lubricated. That means oil or a grease. If any friction is any force is acting on the oil, I think everyone experienced, if the ground or a floor is under oil, if you are placing our foot or you are walking above that, you can feel a kind of a slippery motion, right? So that type of frictional force which is developing is called as a fluid friction. Thank you.